When I was a kid, I didn't really care what kind of cereal my parents bought. The one with the rooster, or the bee, the tiger, or the leprechauns. I just wanted to play the games on the box and dig out the surprise inside the box.
Marketers have always utilized, well, what kind of new products, what technology is out there, how do we actually utilize it?
Everything is marketing, from the way something smells, to the name on the product, to the color and the packaging, to how you go to market, where it's sold, how it's priced.
There's certainly no escaping it.
It's marketing departments that decide and determine how food tastes.
They all sell different stories, and those stories will change over time.
That may be so, but the products don't. Not really. I mean, I'm still buying this, and we're still drinking that. Nearly everyone on the planet eats this.
Food brands are selling an experience and not just the flavor of their product.
I think it's time for a snack, don't you? What are you in the mood for today? This? Or maybe that? Ooh, yeah, that's the one.
Marketers have many ways of triggering your craving for their product and for bringing it mainly to top of mind.
And so food companies spend billions upon billions in packaging design, TV and radio commercials, billboards, online and print ads, celebrity endorsements, product placement, social media.
Marketing's there for a reason. It's to increase profit.
Of course it is. So how does all this come together? Today, we're surrounded by and familiar with so many different brands that we no longer need to be convinced to buy many of them. When was the last time somebody said, "Ooh, you got to try this drink. It's called Coca-Cola." Or, "Wow, get a load of these cornflakes." But at one point, these products had to kickstart their sales strategy. In the 1950s, the "Oh, Oreo" slogan was introduced, and the kids reaching for their favorite cookie in this ad had everyone reaching for them. During World War II, Snap, Crackle, and Pop appeared in this ad, pushing you to save time and money and fuel for the wartime effort. Ever since we've had food to sell, we've tried to convince people to eat it. From yelling in a market square to early print ads and the first billboard rentals, radio and TV, telemarketing, and of course the digital age and all the digital stuff that came with it.
The total food and beverage market in the world is about $6 trillion. In North America, it's about $1 trillion, with the US being, obviously a major part of that piece. Out of that amount, about 5 to 15% of total revenue is spent in marketing, or $900 billion on just marketing itself.
Here's a little perspective from marketing specialist Joanne MacArthur.
If you look at how marketing's evolved over the centuries, as well as the tools that evolved with it, so that really launched us into the whole mass advertising era and really changed food marketing. A kid in the 60s saw 1,500 ads a day. Today, the estimates are anywhere from 15,000 to 30,000.
15 to 30,000 ads a day? Obviously, that includes all the logos and web banners and stuff.
So we've really moved into this era where we're all competing for the consumer's attention. Then the web hits, and Web 2.0, and it just goes skyrocketing. The first thing you see in the morning, the last thing you see at night is probably an ad on your smartphone.
Each one packing in as much information as possible, trying to educate a potential customer on the benefits of trying this new thing. Even just once.
All the brands were always about innovation. What's new, right? New senses. And humans, we love to taste and to try new products because it's about experimentation. It's about just experiencing new things, new tastes. But with a brand new product, people have to understand, well, what is it? When you're dealing with consumer packaged goods, the packaging you see at the retail store is going to be obviously very important. Who is this for? When do I eat it? And so you start to create those stories, that element that help people understand, what am I buying?
And there isn't much real estate on that pack or box or bottle or bag, or much time to get all that information across.
Consumers, when they go into a grocery store, for instance, you are faced with basically 30,000 brand faces as you're going through that grocery store. And yet you're making snap-second decisions, and you're getting through that entire grocery store usually in about 30 minutes.
And so many brands rely on consumer focus groups before launching anything, anywhere.
I am going to show you a product that you may have seen in grocery stores because it's in some, it's not in all. I'm going to put the pack up here for basically, I'm going to count to about 3 because that's about how long you'd see if you were going up and down the aisle. And I want you just to write down your first impressions, what you think the product is.
Hey, grab a pen and paper, folks. Let's do this too.
So first question, what is the product? Like what is it?
I think I was too caught up in looking at the packaging. I did like the packaging.
It just reminds me of something I'd see at Whole Foods. I feel like I don't know if I'd see that at my regular grocery store.
Okay.
I don't remember the brand.
Did anybody write down the brand name or catch what the brand name was?
Is it Mandioca?
Yeah. Okay, interesting.
Huh, I got it. Any of you at home?
We did the focus group for a client. He's Brazilian, and he's introducing this new food for Canadians, a Brazilian cheese bun. But he launched it a year ago. It's not selling, and he doesn't understand why. So he came to us to figure that out.
It's a great example of the obstacles that brands face when they're trying to break borders. Pão de queijo, or Brazilian cheese bread, is a centuries-old traditional snack in Brazil where it would need no introduction at all.
I'm gonna pass this around. I've got a bunch of different ones. So I want you to take a little longer look at it now. There's a lot of messages to catch on the front of that package. I want you to write down the 3 most important things for you personally. When I work around a table, I make sure we hear from everybody equally. That's really important because sometimes you'll have somebody who has a strong opinion, talks a lot, and really sways the group.
Is she talking about me?
And the other thing I like to do when I'm doing a focus group is ask people to jot down their initial perception, because that kind of anchors their opinion, so they're less likely to sway based on what others say.
All I've written down is must-try Brazilian cheese bread. What do these people think?
Why don't we start with Deirdre? What were the most important things on that package?
I can't get beyond the fact that no matter how many times I look at it, it still looks like I would find it in the ice cream aisle.
Like with the pastel colors being for like popsicles or ice cream.
So more sweet colors rather than savory. Okay, so we're gonna bring in some samples, and there's, as you know, 4 different flavors.
No taste test for us, I guess.
It's like bread.
I expected it to be like cheese bell. The thing says cheese all over it.
It's like biting into a baguette.
Last question. What's the one thing you would change in order for you to buy it? And I want you to write that down.
I said the product needs to be displayed and described better. I feel like it's not so obvious on the packaging.
Make the description bigger so that we know it's Brazilian-style cheese buns.
Oh, I feel like the flavors are made into a big deal, but you don't really taste the difference.
Well, I think it looks delicious. It's definitely going on my shopping list. So what came out of this focus group, Joanne?
We learned some really interesting things here in terms of their first impression, that packaging isn't conveying what the manufacturer wants it to convey, and then that perhaps there's also a bit of a disconnect in terms of what the product's delivering versus what it's promising on the front of the pack.
Even though it's just the first phase of testing for this product, it really goes to show how important every detail is, from the size, color, and shape of the package to how the name looks and sounds.
Brand names are very important because they're often the first point of contact between the consumer and the brand. And it turns out that certain features of speech connote things implicitly to us.
It's all part of the fascinating science of sound symbolism, a linguistic concept that suggests that every sound has a unique meaning and emotional impact. And brands know it, or at least the marketers do. Alliterations in brand names, for example, are easy to remember and fun to say. Think of Kit Kat and Coca-Cola, M&M's, ooh, that is fun, Dunkin' Donuts and Tetley Tea. On the other hand, the more phonetically unusual or rare, the more luxurious we perceive a product to be.
For example, if we're talking in English, the sound of je, j, v is kind of rare, and that rarity connotes distance and connotes luxury. Names like Gucci, Ferrari, Haagen-Dazs, those kinds of sounds that we don't hear very often are usually embedded into the brand names of luxury brands.
Also, look at that umlaut, those 2 dots over the first A in Haagen-Dazs. Doesn't it suggest a European sophistication to you? A product steeped in old worldly Danish tradition and craftsmanship?
Haagen-Dazs was actually started by a Jewish immigrant named Reuben Mattis and his wife Rose from Bronx, New York. He loved this idea of creating a product that uses old world traditions. And so they created this great ice cream and they called it Haagen-Dazs.
Here's the thing though. Not only is Haagen-Dazs ice cream not Danish, it's not even a word in Danish.
It's a made-up name, Haagen-Dazs. It's something that it created this allure of artisanal luxury, and it started to grow and grow into what now we all know as what is premium brand of Haagen-Dazs is.
None of that mattered to American ice cream lovers in the 60s with their brand new freezers and supermarket aisles full of frozen foods. By the 1970s, the product was in stores all across the country. Today, it has sales to the tune of $3 billion a year in 50 countries. Perhaps we should add a couple of umlauts to the title of the series. Ut me, out me. Even now that you know the truth, you probably won't eat any less of it. But we can add it to the list of other foods with dubious origins. Hawaiian pizza should actually be called Canadian pizza. And Caesar certainly never ate a Caesar salad. Well, unless he vacationed in Mexico.
Naming is incredibly important. It can really make or break a product. And there's different ways of naming. If you look at older brands, they have what I call very basic names, like Kellogg's Corn Flakes. That's a description of the product. Or you can have descriptions of the functional attributes of a product. So for instance, shake and bake. Or you can talk about a brand's personality, Red Bull. So a lot of money is put into naming, and that's sort of one of the first steps of getting it right.
What's becoming clear to me is that as much as how it tastes, what food marketers are looking for is how it makes you feel.
Food brands are selling an experience and not just the flavor of their product. They're selling something that's aspirational, they're selling something that's inspirational, they're selling something that can be setting a mood or a tone or a social atmosphere. I mean, most commercials for food are people eating with other people. Except for sometimes they'll have a woman lying on a couch, having a decadent piece of chocolate. But apart from that, it's all about sociability and it's about emotion.
That's so true. Food is almost always shared. Food makes us feel like we belong. Food gives us something to look forward to. And food provides a structure to our days. In fact, I challenge you right now to think of a food and not have an emotional reaction of some sort. Go ahead.
It's interesting about how food can create so many connections. Connections to a place, to a time, to a person, to a moment, whether it's popcorn or whether it's bazooka bubble gum. I mean, there's just so many ways that we are connected to our own stories through food. It's magical that way.
And marketable. Any ad executive will tell you, show me a product and I'll create an ad that talks to the whole world. Or to the 18 to 20-year-old female pre-graduates studying in biology on the East Coast of the US who like kale and are very active in the competitive cycling circles. And you know that demographic probably exists. And what's more, we now know exactly what they're thinking.
Today, what we're interested in is to find out how Melissa's brain is responding when she views images of very well-established packaged goods brands. And what we're trying to ascertain is how do these big brands get inside our brain?
Okay, so humans have a complex relationship with food, all food. Unlike so many other commodities, it's necessary. It's cultural, it's physiological, it's geographic, it's natural, or it's synthetic. And so the business of food is a complex blend of art and science, essentially tapping into both sides of the brain. We've come a long way from the Mad Men days when apparently all you needed was a scotch and a cigarette and you could sell soda to babies.
Neuromarketing basically applies the principles and methodologies from the fields of psychology and neuroscience to better understand consumers at a deep subconscious level.
How deep or subconscious can choosing a box of cookies get?
Neuroscientists now understand that these big global packaged food brands act as mental shortcuts to rewards. In other words, they make it very easy for us to learn the association between a logo and something that's very tasty.
That's because they're appealing to what psychologists call the System 1 decision-making process. I'll let neuroscientist and pioneer in neuromarketing, Gemma Calvert, explain.
You might know it as your gut instinct, autopilot. Most of the time, we do routine chores on System 1. So doing the grocery shopping whilst simultaneously on your mobile phone to your friends, your arm reaches out and grabs the same food products that it did last week. But we also have another system.
I bet it's called System 2?
System 2, which refers to our conscious or rational reasoning decision-making route, and it uses up more energy, and therefore, by and large, we tend to go with the gut. We tend to sort of rely on our automatic processing System 1 brain.
Yeah, that's an understatement. Research shows that System 1 is in charge 95% of the time.
So it's that split-second decision. You're catching all those different elements and you're sorting them through. And it's that first moment of truth at the grocery store or online.
Okay, so let's see how all this science and research comes together.
So Melissa is wearing a 32 electrode cap, which can pick up the electrical signals from her brain as she's involved in the task. And we're trying to detect whether there's a difference in the levels of engagement, whether she's got more memory encoding into long-term memory, and also if there's an inherent preference response for the branded foods compared to the ones that are non-branded. And when she's about to make a decision or something's more engaging, the activity in those electrodes increases.
Okay, yeah.
So what we're basically looking at here are changes in the amount of activity in the different electrodes, and do they correspond to the branded versus non-branded items?
Did anyone else not know how much science and tech goes into marketing a pizza or a bag of candy? It might not be rocket science, but it is neuroscience.
This is very exciting.
It really is.
And we can see effectively she's more engaged. Her attention is increased to the products which are branded.
Melissa is just one subject. But what's amazing is that in large-scale research of this type, the majority of people react exactly in the same way. Their brains literally light up when they recognize a brand. Now, you might think, why not just ask Melissa which products she prefers? But here's the thing. While she'd know what she likes and doesn't like, it's unlikely that Melissa could tell us why.
Most of the time, it's very difficult to introspect and to tell market researchers what we actually want. And we're not too clever at determining why we like the things we do. Neuromarketing allows us to understand what aspects of a food product or a brand, its pack and so forth, is actually driving the brain's pleasure response.
It's all about tapping into perception and knowing exactly what it is about a product that is the selling point of that product. But hang on a moment. Can we be blamed for not always knowing what we like and don't like? There's often so much conflicting information around food that I don't know what I'm supposed to be eating from one day to the next.
One of the things that made eating so difficult is just this mishmash of strange and often contradictory messages we keep getting about this being good for you or this being bad. You know, I still wince when I crack an egg because I grew up in the 80s when eggs were believed to increase cholesterol. This fear of food, I think, has played such a strong role in our dysfunctional relationship with food because we're not meant to fear it in that way. It's become so chaotic.
Kale is in. Now it's out. Chocolate's good for you. No, it's not. Eat more of this. Now eat less. Coffee. No meat, some meat, good fats, bad fats, no fats. No soy, no salt, no sugar.
Big and successful brands are going to be able to adapt to the food needs and the food wants of their customers. And so when they hear feedback of changing trends and different demographics being drawn to their products, and they change accordingly, and that's what keeps them alive and current. But at the same time also, the consumer is very much affected by what it seems they should be eating, and everything gets mixed up with media, and you know, your friends are eating this, or you see advertising for that, and there's celebrities and so forth, and that it reinforces the concept that this is what I should be eating when I go out, or this is what I should be buying when I'm in the grocery store. And so there's a sort of a two-way street between the customer and the brand.
Have you ever thought about why or how these foods seem to take hold? #avocado has over 12 million posts on Instagram. Sourdough, a staple of the COVID-19 pandemic, is out now, and homemade pasta is in.
Food trends are nothing new. Food trends have always been around as long as humans have had the ability to choose the type of food that they can eat. As long as they're not eating for survival and you've had some choice about what's for dinner and lunch, you've had preferences. Where those preferences go are food trends. What's new and what's different is the speed at which trends develop and the power that they have. Their political power, their economic power, their influence in the culture.
Hey, remember that cupcake craze? You couldn't escape them for neither love nor money a few years back. What was that all about?
The great cupcake of the early 2000s really began because there was a 20-second shot in one episode of the 3rd season of Sex and the City where 2 of the main characters are eating cupcakes outside Magnolia Bakery. They don't mention cupcakes, they don't talk about the cupcakes, they're talking about men and sex and dating. And that began this interest in that bakery and then cupcakes in general that started to grow and bloom around the world as it was carried by blogs and food media and magazines and the internet and social media. To the point where, you know, there was a woman in Asuncion, Paraguay, who opened up a cupcake store because she heard that it was associated with Sex and the City, which was her favorite show.
But by 2014, well, the cupcake craze was dead. And then it was all, long live the cronut. And I think I missed that one. But apparently I was the only one who did.
Once upon a time, you would have to be living in a city like New York and hear that someone was making a new kind of donut and croissant combo called a cronut. But, you know, by the time the cronut was unveiled as this sort of hot new pastry, you know, you had images of it going around the world within minutes, and people were flying into New York to taste it, waiting in line, buying a box of cronuts, flying back to Sydney or Jakarta or, you know, Montreal and taking it apart and copying it and making their own thing.
Seriously, how did I not hear about this?
The big brands now see that before they could sort of watch the market and see it evolve, and if something eventually got there, okay, maybe now it's sort of ready. Now what they're seeing is, in order to stay on top of their competition, you need to change your tastes. You need to get the next thing that people want, and that craving is happening quick.
So it's these trends which become hits that push the industry to innovate and create new flavors. Marketing teams have to be aware of every little noise and buzz out there while trying to create a hype of their own.
As a big brand, if you're in a big category, you start to hit a peak in sales. And so you have to start to say, well, how do we actually get more? It's like a sports team Instead of playing to win, you're almost starting to play not to lose. And that can be really dangerous because you should always be on the offensive. You should always be trying to create new products. So you either have to launch new brands and new flavors and keep things really invigorating, or you have to get into new categories. And it's a constant game.
And they do it, and they absorb the cost of doing it, and they succeed at it. There are 200 flavors of Lay's potato chips. 200. How many have you tried? 8? 11? Starbucks claims it can offer more than 170,000 drink combinations. Try multiplying the quantity of cup size options with all the flavor options, topping options, milk options, coffee and tea options, sweetener options, special seasonal options. Yeah, I'm looking at you, pumpkin spice people. If you tried one per day, it'd take you 465 years to taste all the combinations. Mine's a grande white chocolate cinnamon chai latte with whole milk and whipped cream. Hold the water, please. What are you having? And get this, Ben & Jerry's makes 100 different ice cream flavors around the world. There are 25 Oreo flavors. Carrot cake? No, thank you.
You know, it's this fickle dance of consumers. We want, again, that consistency, but we want that variety. And that's a dance that is a very difficult storytelling thing to do, which is wonderful for the ad agencies and marketing agencies that are employed by these big brands.
And those brand stories, well, they tend to stick with us forever.
Semantic memory is the store of all the concepts that we have in the world. And it's different from procedural memory, for example, is like how to ride a bike. So it's really knowledge about the meanings of concepts.
Okay, I think I get it. So because of marketing and branding, we associate meaning with concepts, and it sticks for a lifetime. Like how we know that Frosted Flakes are great, and America runs on Dunkin', and KFC is finger-licking good. What a difference whole eggs make, according to Hellmann's. And that Stella Artois is a reassuringly expensive beer. Or is it? So, let's have a quick recap, shall we? Marketing is everything. And it's not just that ad that pops up on your phone or the billboard that you pass by each morning.
Every day, people are surrounded with thousands and thousands of messages. When you walk down the street, when you see everything, everybody's vying for the attention of consumers to try to get them to say, why buy me? Why now? Why this? And so we're all trying to actually create this type of experience and touch point every single time you actually look at advertising today.
This one's healthy. This one's affordable. This one's ethical. This one's new. This one is old and familiar. This one gives you permission to take a break. This one promises to help you get more done. This is a treat. This is a must. This one's for the holidays. And this is the one you can rely on every day.
Everything communicates in some way to the consumer, and that needs to be thought of, and it needs to be consistent across all those different touch points. Because if you let the consumer down at any particular touch points and aren't true to who you are as a brand, it creates dissonance and it breaks trust. And trust is ultimately, that's how you become an iconic food brand. So you want to get it right.
And you don't just need to get it right once. You have to get it right forever.
And there's a big prize at the end of that, if you can get it, but nobody knows for sure. Clear Pepsi, for example, right? We all remember that. Everyone's thinking of the Van Halen Super Bowl commercial. Right now.
Anyway.
Think about how much advertising, what that messaging is, and you're constantly working on it. Because as people and culture and trends change, you have to adjust and change with it. And that's the key, is that you're always adjusting the dial. And this is where you have to be really careful.
Because there are a few cautionary tales out there, like this one. Now, the earliest evidence of ale goes back about 5,000 years. And founded in 1366, for 600 years or so, Stella Artois was considered a pretty good European beer. But it was in the 1980s that it really made a name for itself with a brand new identity as reassuringly expensive. Cinematic TV commercials like this one reflected their slogan, and it quickly became a success story previously unheard of in the beer trade. That is, until it made the fateful decision in the early 2000s to start selling in British supermarkets.
Grocers thought this would be a great loss leader. And grocers use loss leaders as ways of getting people in the store. So they'll take a product that everybody knows costs a certain amount, and they'll discount it. And that's what happened with Stella Artois. So all of a sudden, it was no longer reassuringly expensive.
And because of this, it started attracting a different clientele than the one it was after.
All of a sudden, it was contributing to binge drinking, and it was seen as part of the whole hooliganism that rose in the UK behind football or soccer matches. And there were all sorts of media photos and in newspapers showing Stella Artois with young, drunk males, fistfights. And all of a sudden, you know, this premium brand was no longer premium. With an iconic brand, you want to maintain trust. And you maintain trust by being true to who you are. You don't change who you are overnight, because we don't trust people when they do that.
So even though the recipe hadn't changed, the image had. And it would take several years and a new multi-million-dollar campaign to reestablish Stella's sophisticated and upmarket reputation.
They couldn't use the whole reassuringly expensive ad campaign anymore, so they came out with a new one, which was called She Is a Thing of Beauty. And they really romanced the product. They went back to the roots. They created their own chalice glassware design. They came up with a 9-step way of pouring a Stella Artois and enjoying it. So they created their own ritual as a way to re-premiumize the product.
Now, of course, having a niche customer when you've created and promoted a niche brand is all well and good. But for many of the brands that we know and love, the real aim of marketing is, well, to own the whole market. And here's the thing. Just like taste, these marketing campaigns aren't a one-size-fits-all.
One of the worst mistakes that a lot of companies make is that they assume that what works in one country or one area is going to automatically work somewhere else.
It might not even be possible for all sorts of reasons. I mean, if there are no proper highways, a country can't support billboards. There's not even a billboard industry to support. If a population has limited or no access to TV, then broadcast advertising is moot. And then there are a whole slew of cultural differences as well.
Because people are different. Cultures are different. And so how they eat products, when they eat, what ingredients, all those kinds of things are totally unique. And so ad agencies have people on the ground who say, actually, you know what? That's not going to work here. We need to actually adapt this. We need to change it to make it much more culturally contextualized, that people will actually understand it.
Because let's just say slogans and slang can very easily get lost in translation. Like when Schweppes tonic water translated as Schweppes toilet water in Italy. And in Hong Kong, where the KFC slogan, "It's finger lickin' good," was translated as "Eat your fingers off." Oh, that's not good. Do you think that was before Google Translate? But these different factors aren't limited to just language, cultural, and ethnic identities. There are plenty of differences between socioeconomic groups, between men and women, and between generations. So, how do these food companies and their marketing agencies know that all the money they're spending on marketing is worth it? Is working even? How do they know that it's because of that new ad campaign that sales are skyrocketing?
The biggest issues that marketers face is you spend millions of dollars on advertising and endorsements and sampling and all this, and it's saying, well, which activity drove sales? And the fact is, we actually don't know, which is crazy. It sounds nuts.
Yeah, a bit. So how do you decide where to push, when to hold back, or what to change?
Great thing about social media is you get feedback pretty quickly. It's not like the old traditional advertising where you'd air a commercial on TV and then you'd call up the next day to see if people remembered it. So, with half of our marketing budget in social media now, you can actually see, did people click on it? Did they like it? Did they share it? Did they comment on it? And it's this understanding of agile marketing, perpetual beta. So you don't come up with a marketing plan for a year and say, okay, it's set in stone and you go do it. Because there's constant feedback loop now. And you can see what's working, what's not. You can adjust, you can tweak, you can test.
So even if you are turning a profit and raking in new customers, there's still no time to kick back.
You constantly have to be feeding it. You constantly have to be doing this. And so you're constantly trying to figure out that right formula so that you're spending just the right amount to get the best results without overspending.
So essentially, a constant push and pull between influencing and listening, getting the message out and adjusting it, getting people to like something while at the same time trying to figure out what it is that they like.
It's funny that a lot of people think that there's these mastermind marketers that are trying to manipulate people into buying stuff, when the reality is that we just go with what we see happening, with where the trends of culture is taking us, and we respond to them. And we're trying to see, well, what's coming up next? So you try to get on that, the edge of it to try to give, the clients and the brands the best chance to be sold.
Marketers are trend optimizers, not trendsetters. At the end of the day, we, the consumers, make and break trends. We are the market.
Marketing can only move consumer perception and consumer acceptance within a certain boundary. And if it's not part of your cultural experience, if you don't feel safe, if you don't trust it, I don't think there's any amount of marketing that's going to overcome that.
Yeah. I mean, there's no amount of advertising that's gonna get my granny on a dirt bike.
They knew when they created Red Bull that it wasn't just simply a beverage that was meant to quench your thirst and give you kind of a pleasurable taste sensation. It had a functional quality. It's an energy drink, so they created a kind of a whole category out of thin air.
In 2020, the global energy drink sales reached more than $60 billion. And leading the pack is Red Bull, launched in the late 1980s. Back then, there was no energy drink category per se, and so the makers, rather than try to compete in the soft drinks and soda market, decided to create one. Without any of the print, billboard, and TV ads that the other big brands were using.
The secret with Red Bull is that they targeted this 18 to 30-year-old demographic, and they started to go to where this audience was. They started to go to concerts, big events. They started to get into like mountain biking and kite surfing and all these kind of fringe activities that the Coca-Cola and the Pepsis weren't in.
In their quest to become iconic, the strategy was groundbreaking. Rather than bring the consumer to the product, bring the product to the consumer. On the ground, in the air, on the waves, and the airwaves.
As the rise of YouTube and user-generated content was taking hold, Red Bull was right at the forefront of creating stuff that people wanted to engage with. They wanted to watch. They're curious about it. And they could get away with it because Red Bull was just seen as this rebellious, sleek, cool kind of energy drink company that was totally different from everybody else.
It was the first time in a long time that a brand had come along and changed the marketing game so entirely. And it worked. In less than a decade, Red Bull signed 2 international athletes to the brand and created the first international kiteboarding competition. In 2001, it sold its billionth can. It debuted as a Formula One team in 2005, completed the Red Bull Stratos jump in 2012, and is now synonymous with extreme sports and major music festivals. About 900,000 cans are sold every hour, which means more than 20 million cans a day and more than 7 billion cans a year in over 170 countries. Iconic enough for you? Of course, branded content and experiential marketing isn't new in the big brand food sector. celebrity endorsements, product placement in our favorite shows, sponsored sports, and musical events are all content-driven marketing strategies.
The trend right now is experience is a way to connect with your audience at a level that they want. And so you always want to connect it, but you have to have taste, you have to have a good product. But instead of just trying to just shout advertising, at people, because we're very savvy and discerning, it's better to join in with them. So you're at the music concert with them, and then there's samples, and you're saying, you guys love this music? We love it too. We're just part of your life, and you're just with them, Oh, you love hockey? We love hockey too. This is why our beer fits your lifestyle, right? Go, yeah, we're together.
Yeah, hey, I'm sold already. What am I buying? But it's true that in today's digital landscape, it's been taken to a whole new level.
Humans are wired to be social, and we connect through stories. If you think about early man, we connected around a campfire, and social media is just a bigger campfire. Now, the average person has more power in the palm of their hand than the average marketer does.
Which means that food companies and big brands have to constantly reinvent themselves to keep up with consumer demands.
As technology changes, marketers change. So now that we've got TikTok and Snapchat and Instagram stories and all these things out there, marketers are trying to figure out, well, our consumers are on there. The people we want to buy our products are on these channels and mediums. How do we get in the game? How do we talk to them? How do we be relevant to them? And what worked back in 1920 is 100% different than what works today.
Yeah, but it's not as though these brands have to start from scratch each time.
It'll be this story of the rugged guy and out fishing, and then all of a sudden, hey, we're not selling to enough women. Oh, all of a sudden it's, ladies drink beer. And wait a minute, we're forgetting the gay population. Wait a minute, we're only marketing to white guys. And that story will keep changing, and it sort of bifurcates. And then other things like Heinz ketchup, I think, those brands are just so iconic, and the taste is so central. You can kind of do whatever you want, but the story's going to fit anywhere.
Of course, societal changes and shifting consumer behaviors go hand in hand within the food business. And sure, it might seem as though the demands are coming in faster and more furiously than ever before. Tasty, nutritious, traceable, sustainable, humane, ethical, environmentally sound, attractive, convenient, but that's a good thing. It's progress.
And it's really important is how humans talk about their food, about how humans come together to feed themselves. It's really important to our health as humans. And I mean mental health, soul health, and physical health. And I know that companies are beginning to think more about that. You'll see barcodes on things, and you can hold your phone up to it. My favorite one recently is a fish company from Iceland called Niceland. And, you can pick up the package of frozen fish from Iceland and scan a barcode, and you'll see where the fish was caught, what exact boat, the exact fisherman, the exact equipment, when it arrived at the dock, how it gets unpacked, where the plane is. You could track the actual plane that brings it over. So you can get these stories, whether it's a barcode or whether, it's an avatar or whether it's a immersive experience.
And so part of marketing today is involving the consumer. Because let's face it, transparency and authenticity without action are just buzzwords. And we are holding feet to the fire these days, keeping food companies accountable.
I think marketing is going to evolve again as we enter this age of cynicism. I think that companies, especially big companies, are going to be expected to play a bigger role in our food system. And I think consumers are going to demand not just transparency in what's in their food and how their food's created, but also purpose transparency. You have to understand that what you now do in one country is it's borderless. You can find out about it in another country. And that whole concept of radical transparency, consumers want to know that. They want to know where the ingredients in their products came from. They want to know how the workers were treated. They want to know how the waste streams were treated, how the planet was treated.
We also want to know that our stores are stocked, that our pantries and refrigerators are full of whatever we want, whenever we want it. So marketing is not just about persuasion anymore. It's becoming equal parts information.
People are getting access to information, and we're learning more as a culture. We're learning what's sustainable, what's not, what actually is good for us and what's not good for us. You know, it wasn't too long ago that we didn't even have nutritional labels or ingredients sometimes even in the packages, and now that's standard and mandatory. And so as we learn as a society, what we then demand from food manufacturers, it changes. And so you have a combination of society and consumers placing pressure to change and to make things more sustainable and more healthy for consumers, which is absolutely, they're responding. Just like the government responds by creating legislation, the manufacturers in these large organizations, they will respond to what consumers demand. So if you want to make a difference in this world, if you want to actually have a voice, start to choose to buy the things that are important to you, that you value, and I guarantee you that the organizations and brands will change with you.
They always do. There is no more Marlboro Man. And nobody would suggest today that women might not be capable of opening a bottle of ketchup. What the? It's a sure and welcome sign of the times. Proof that all of the touch points of a marketing plan have to come together in perfect harmony for their time. The product, the message, the brand's position on social issues.
I mean, you can't decouple one thing. So you need to test all the different elements, but then you also need to test them together. And then you also need to be continually future-proofing them by understanding where your consumer and the marketplace is going next. And there's also things that you don't expect are going to happen, right? A pandemic changes the world. Who saw that coming? And then there's change coming out of that with consumers and a refocus on societal values and a whole loss of trust in things that we used to take for granted. So even the best marketers, it's tough. It's very tough.
Prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, with so much competition out there, big branded packaged food sales had been plateauing for years. But almost overnight, restaurants shut down, offices and movie theaters closed, schools went online, and cafes shut their doors. People found themselves stuck at home with no idea for how long. And so, if they could, billions of people hit the supermarket. But interestingly, the only items uniting the world were toilet paper and hand sanitizer. Because depending on where you live, the panic buying was very different. In France, the first foods to sell out were pasta and canned fish. In Germany, it was flour and sugar and dried foods. In Japan, meat and instant ramen. The US went nuts for peanut butter. In England, no surprise there, they were panic buying tea. In South Africa, it was rice in cans. Thailand, noodles. Brazil, olive oil and sugar. Suddenly, packaged and processed foods were the way to go because they were safe, they were familiar, they were easy, they were affordable, and they were abundant. Brands, the ones we love and cherish, are there for us when we need them. They're always reassuring. Yes, they are. This Coca-Cola ad confirms it. Together tastes better. And it does. So we stick together, we pull through. But look, no matter how great a campaign you have or how many people it reaches, if you can't get your product to them, well, it's all for nothing. Because whatever we're eating or however it's sold to us, there are roughly 7.8 billion of us right now. And we each require about 1.4 kilos of food a day, not including water. To satisfy that need, well, about 3.7 billion metric tons of food need to be produced every year. And it all comes from all over the world. Producing it and procuring it and transporting it requires a vast, complex web that each and every one of us depend on every single day. Yep, when it comes to food, the supply chain is, well, at the top of the food chain.